Hey now, party people! Today we are going to take a look at Yggdrasil from Z-Man Games. Now, interesting thing about this is that this game was out of print for a little while. I think this is the second edition of the game. It comes packaged with an expansion that was previously sold separately from the base game, and they included it with the second edition. And I think that this edition came out the end of last year, very beginning of this year. I'm having a hard time remembering, but as soon as I saw that it was out, I snatched it right up, and sure enough, it sold out again, and I think they're having to go to another printing of the game, but because I had been wanting this game for quite a while. I saw pictures of it, I liked the theme, I liked the artwork, and I heard that it was brutally difficult, and that is exactly how I like my cooperative games. And that's what this is. This is a cooperative game where each of the players, up to 6 players, or solo, are taking control of Norse gods from Norse mythology. Okay, that makes sense. And you're trying to beat back all of these evil Norse creatures and gods, like, of course, Loki and Surt, the fire giant, and Hel, the death god, or whatever he's supposed to be, and Nidog, the world snake, or the evil snake, whatever I don't know. Not like I'm really well versed in Norse mythology other than what I read in Thor comics. And that was many years ago. But I still liked the theme, I still liked all the artwork, and what I had heard about the game was really good, so I snatched it right up as soon as I could, and I was very excited to give it a try. Now, I've had it for a while, and since then I've probably played it 6 times maybe, and I was so eager to give it more plays that I put it on my list of 10 games to play 10 times in 2014. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I did a video talking about just this. You can go and look at one of my other playlists. So I was certainly invested in having fun with the game and, you know, playing it to its utmost. And I still have more plays to go this year. So, but what does that all mean? Do I really love the game? How do I actually feel about it? Well, let's go ahead and do a brief overview of the game. Then we're going to come back and we'll get to the bottom of it. Alright, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Yggdrasil. This is a cooperative game for 1 to 6 players where you take control of the mythological Norse gods and you're trying to prevent Ragnarok. The way you're going to prevent this is by keeping these enemies of Asgard, these evil gods and monsters, from entering the home of Odin, or by having too many of them get onto the world tree. If one enemy of Asgard gets into Odin's home through all these different stages, at the end of that round, all the players lose. If 3 of them get past this dividing line at the end of that round, all the players lose. And if 5 of them get past this dividing line, all the players will lose at the end of the round. So you win by holding out. You have this deck of enemy cards here. At the start of each player's turn, you have to draw one of those enemy cards and do whatever the effect says. Every card is going to move at one of these tokens forward, and it's going to have a negative effect as well, like an enemy power that you have to endure. So for instance, a lot of this won't make sense because I haven't explained the rest of the game yet, but just to go through it, when you draw Hel's card, you'll move him forward, and you're also going to have to take Viking tokens out of one of these bags here. Viking tokens help you in combat. You can only get them by going into those bags, which represent the different islands of Midgard, the Earth, so having to take them out is a bad thing. Loki is going to make you draw ice giants from this pile in the ice fortress. That's a bad thing because ice giants are going to block off different actions that you have to take on the board, and you have to fight them in order to get them to go away. And both Hel and Loki's power is also dependent on power. There's these little lightning bolts here that correspond to the bottom of the chart. As the enemies go through the different stages of Yggdrasil, the world tree, not only are their power levels going to go up and make their effects worse. So for instance, Loki only draws 1 giant when he's on stage 1 or 2, but at stage 3 and 4 he's going to have to draw 2 of them because there's 2 lightning bolts there. But also each of these has a number, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the number you have to meet or beat in order to knock back one of those enemies during the course of the game. So the further along they get, the harder it is to push them back, the more negative stuff you have to deal with. But moving on with the enemy cards, you have Surt. When you draw Surt, you're going to roll the die that comes with the game, and the die matches up with the 4 different colors of bags. Whatever color comes up, you're going to drop more fire giants into that bag. Fire giants are also in the bags with the Vikings, and they are nothing. They're just bad things that they don't do anything for you when you draw. They're just keeping you from drawing Vikings, so that's bad. Fenrir is even worse because Fenrir is going to eat up your actions. When you draw his cards, you move him forward, and then you have to roll the die for to try and get one of the faces pictured here on the die. So for level 1, you have to get a blank, or white, in other words, black or green, and then in order to actually roll the die, you have to waste an action. So you're always wasting at least one. But if you fail and you don't get the right die face, depending on his power level, then you're going to have to roll again, and again potentially, until you get it. And you only get 3 actions on your turn, so that can be very, very devastating. Jormungand's ability is not dependent on the power level of the stages at all. Instead, when you draw him, you're going to move the Valkyrie token here out in Midgard back to the Rainbow Bridge, which is their starting position and does nothing for you. And then you're going to roll the die, and whatever color comes up on the die, you're going to take the Submerged token here and cover one of these islands with it. That's going to prevent you from drawing anything from the bag corresponding to that island, which could be very bad. But worse, because it sets the Valkyries back, your progress is halted as far as moving them out to an island you want to be on. And finally, Nidhogg also does not have a power that is dependent on the power level. Instead, when you move Nidhogg, you'll move him, and you're going to move one of the gods that's farthest back along the row. So if you drew Nidhoggs at the start of the game, well, all 5 of the other gods are farthest back, so you choose which one. But on future turns, it's whichever one is farthest back. If there's more than one, it's the heroes will choose. So Nidhogg can be very dangerous because he's going to keep moving more and more gods up faster, which is, of course, bad because that's not only a lose condition, but they get harder as they go up. So these are all very bad. There's 7 cards of each of these in the deck, and you just have to withstand them. You have to go through every single card in that deck. When that deck runs out, if you're still alive, none of the losing game conditions have been met, then you're going to win the game. Now, this is the typical game setup. You'll have the deck of cards, which you'll shuffle up. You have the Fire Giants here in the Kingdom of Fire. You have some Viking tokens here in the World of the Dead. All the rest of the Fire Giant tokens and the Viking tokens are in each of those 4 bags, which I said correspond to each of these different islands. You also have a deck of Ice Giant cards, which I mentioned before, a deck of weapon cards, which are weapons that the heroes get to use. You have the enemies of Asgard there, perched at the doorstep of Odin's home, or about to get to the doorstep of Odin's home. You have the World of the Elves, full of elf tokens, and you have Vadir, I believe his name, Vanir, who's like some sort of tree god in his sacred land area, which is all there to help you. So each of the different areas of the board represents an action that the gods can take on their turns. Every character is going to get one of these god cards, which I'll get back to because they all have the special powers that won't mean much until we get further along in the game. But after you get done drawing your enemy card at the start of your personal turn, then you get to take your 3 actions, assuming Fenrir hasn't eaten all of them. So let's just go through the different actions that you can take. Here we have Midgard, which is essentially Earth. And like I said, you have the Valkyries and their Rainbow Bridge, and you have the 4 different islands with the 4 different bags. If you choose to use one of your actions, and you can only take each action 1 time. You have 3 actions, but you can't double up or triple up on them unless you have a special power that allows you to do so. If you take the Midgard action, you get to move the Valkyries 1 space, and then you may, you don't have to move them by the way, you may move them 1 space, and then you may choose to draw from the bag that they moved onto. So if I move them from here to here, and there's no Submerged token on that island, I get to draw from the white bag. So you're going to take the white bag, and you're going to draw 3 counters from it. If you draw, and by the way, now, if you want an easier game, you can look in the bag first to kind of count up how many Fire Giant tokens and how many Viking tokens there are. At the start of the game, and this will change as the game goes on, the white bag is the worst because there's 12 Fire Giants, 6 Vikings. So it's more likely you're going to draw a dud that does nothing for you. Whereas you go all the way up to the black bag has only 3 Fire Giant tokens and 15 Vikings. But because you can only move the Valkyries 1 space for that action, and because Jormungand keeps kicking them back, it can be very difficult to get to the Black Island and especially difficult to stay there. But in any event, whenever you go to any of the island tokens and choose to draw, you're going to draw 3 tokens. And, well, I got very lucky in the white bag, so that's 3 Vikings. When you draw Vikings, you get to keep them, put them on your character card, or next to your character card, and use them in the future. If you draw Fire Giants, you keep them out until you draw all 3, and then when you're done, you throw the Fire Giants back into the bag. So that's why it can be kind of dangerous. I just happened to get lucky drawing in the white bag. And I'll explain what the Vikings do in a little bit. So that's the Midgard action. Next, we're going to talk about the Dwarven Forge, which is right next to it. Now, the Dwarven Forge is actually not a randomized deck. there are 6 different types of weapons, one for each different type of the enemies of the Asgard, and there's actually 3 different levels of those 6 weapons, so there's a total of 18 cards in this deck. So there's a +1 weapon for each of the gods, there's a +2, and there's a +3. If you take the Dwarven Forge action, you get to take, if it's your first time going there, you get to take a level 1 weapon of your choice, assuming it hasn't been taken by somebody else. If you go there again on a future turn, you get to either take another different +1, or you get to upgrade one of the +1s that you already took into a +2. And as you might guess, each of these is going to give you a static bonus when you enter into combat with the particular god that is keyed into, up to a maximum of +3 if you have that weapon. You can't hold on to multiples of the same weapon. So you can't have a +1 Mjolnir and then a +2 Mjolnir. It doesn't make any sense. But another player can get one of the lower level versions of it. I don't know how that works exactly, but there you go. And again, because you can only do all these actions once on your turn. You have 3 actions, but you can't double up on the same action. Then we're going to talk about the World of the Elves. The World of the Elves, simply, is you're going to take one of the elves, put it next to your character card. I'll explain what those do during combat in a little bit. The World of Darkness, which is this area down here, which I rarely ever see people use, but this allows 2 different gods to basically swap different tokens with each other. So you can swap Viking tokens and elf tokens. Then we have the World of the Dead. The World of the Dead is going to let you take 5 Vikings and seed them into any of the bags of your choice, which makes it more likely you're going to draw Vikings. The opposite of that is the Kingdom of Fire. You can go to the Kingdom of Fire and draw 5 tokens from any of the bags of your choice. Any fire giants that come out go back into the Kingdom of Fire. So you can thin out the bag of fire giants and put more Vikings in it if you wish, depending on which action you choose to take. Then we have the Ice Fortress. Now, Loki usually brings out ice giants against your will, but if you want, you can choose to fight whatever the top giant is on the top of the discard pile. So first you'll roll combat to see if you win or not. If you don't win, nothing happens. If you do win, you get to take the top card off the deck and put it on face up, and it counts as a defeated giant. Now, whether it comes out, well, usually this will only come out from Loki, so if it does come out, every one of them will have, most of them will have something that gets blocked off on the board. So if this green rune fire giant comes out, he's going to block off the World of the Elves. So take one of these block off tokens, put it over there, then no player can use that area until this giant is killed. That's if Loki brings it out. Now, if you choose to either fight an existing one that's already out or fight one off the top of the deck, and you win, the result is the same. You get to claim this giant, put it down to the side of the board, and there are 4 giants of every color of rune down here. If you manage to kill all 4 giants corresponding to a color, you get a special effect. So if you kill all 4 of the giants with the green rune, you get to take 15 Vikings from the World of the Dead, or however many is there, and give them to the gods as you wish. If you kill, let's see what's the next one in the deck. If you kill the red one, you get to move 3 enemy counters back 1 space. So those can be very, very good, but it can be a random chance. Now, how combat works with the giants is you're going to, well, first you decide whether or not you want to spend Vikings. If you've claimed Viking tokens by going into the bags, or for someone gave them to you, or for whatever other reason, you have to decide right off the bat before you roll whether you're committing any of them. Each one of them gives you a +1 bonus in combat in addition to whatever you roll on the die. Now, the elves work a little bit different. The elves give you a +1 as well, but you can decide to use them after you roll in order to try to make your roll a success. So that's why it's a little bit tougher to get the elves, because you only get to get 1 elf for 1 action, whereas you can get multiple Vikings with an action if you do it right. But combat will simply work by rolling the die, and that was a terrible roll, but seeing how many of the weapons you get. So the green face gives you 2 weapons. The black face is the best one. It gives you 3. You have to get at least a 3 in order to fight and defeat one of the ice giants, or the frost giants. And then you get to just put them out, and hopefully you can complete a rune. When the whole deck is gone, they're gone, but that means that by that point you've completed all 4 of the runes, and you're probably doing pretty well. The Sacred Land is a little bit weird. Every time you take an action for the Sacred Land, you're going to move the Veneer token up 1. Then, on a future turn, depending on where he's at, you can spend an action to move Veneer all the way back down to the bottom, and whatever space he was next to, you get to do that special action. And the higher it goes up, the better it is. Like the ultimate action here simply lets you go into the deck of fire giant cards or ice giant cards, take a giant of your choice and kill it, essentially, and then reshuffle, which can help you complete a rune. The next one down is move an enemy space 1 space backwards, which is really good. Rearrange the first 6 cards on the top of the enemy deck is the next one, and so on. So that can be a very good space, but you have to plan for it. And finally, we have what is actually, I guess, you would consider this Yggdrasil, which is the space where you, or I'm sorry, Asgard is what this whole area here is called. And in Asgard, you are simply choosing, if you take that action, you are choosing to fight the evil gods. So you choose one of the gods and you choose to fight them the same way that you would fight an ice giant. Decide whether you're committing Vikings, roll, or using any kind of special power, roll the die, decide if you have to commit elves, and hope that you win. What you have to roll and beat in order to knock one of them back is dependent on their power level. So like I said, 5, 6, 7, or 8, depending on their position. And that's really what you can do on your turn. You just try to take as many actions as you can as efficiently as possible, assuming Fenrir didn't eat all of your actions, and try to keep the gods knocked back, all the while trying to stock up on Vikings, stock up on elves, potentially trying to kill ice giants in order to complete runes, and just hoping to outlast the enemy deck and keep all the enemies as far back as possible. Now let's explain what some of the different gods' powers do. So I'm not going to go through every single one, but just some of the heavy hitters. So of course we have Odin, and there'll be a little pictograph down here sort of giving you a hint as to what he does. Odin at the beginning of his turn draws 2 enemy cards instead of 1, chooses the one he wants to play, and puts the other one back on or under the bottom of the deck. Thor just gets a constant +1 in combat, which doesn't seem like much, but it can really, the numbers, as you can tell, are pretty low. So +1 is really, really tremendously huge. Sif is going to get to, every time that she goes to the Dwarven Forge for 1 action, she gets to do it 3 times, essentially, which means she can just automatically take a +3 weapon every time she goes there. So Sif might just want to grab like a +3 of every weapon, potentially, and let everyone else have the +1s and +2s. Idun gets to draw an enemy card, and the power of its effect is reduced by 1. So, in other words, if you draw the Surt, the fire giant, and he's level 1, you don't have to add any giants. If you draw Fenrir, he's automatically calmed by spending an action, which is, you know, it's a little bit different than how it's supposed to work, but then you don't have to roll, essentially. And it doesn't really affect Jormungand or Nidhogg. Then we have Freya. Freya's action is she can perform 2 of her actions on the same world. So she's allowed to double up on one of the different worlds. And let's see. That's about all the ones I really feel the need to explain. So that's the core game. Those are some of the different gods that you have the chance, but there's a lot of different ones you can choose from or do them randomly. Let's explain a couple of the other extra little add-on bits of the game. First off, if you find that the game is too easy, and that's rarely the case, but if you want more of a challenge, there's 2 different types of cards you can add into the enemy deck. The first are the angry enemy cards, which look the same as the normal enemy cards, except they have a lightning bolt up in the top, and the little symbol up here that would normally tell you to move the enemies forward 1 space is telling you to move it forward 2 spaces. So every time you draw one, you move the enemy forward 2 spaces, and then you also have to do their nasty action. And how you want to do this is you take however many of these as you want, and replace normal versions of the cards with the angry versions of them in order to make the game more difficult. The other type of extra difficulty card are the Ragnarok cards, and there's 4 of them that come with the game. You can use however many of them as you want, and when you draw a Ragnarok card, you move multiple different enemies depending on which card it is. Like this one moves 4, this one moves 6, this one moves 4 and 4, and they're all different ones. You move all of those different enemies 1 space forward, which can be really, really, really bad. It makes the game very, very tough. And the book does recommend that if you're going to use any of these special cards, you sort of seed them specially throughout the deck to make sure that they don't cluster up and just make things tremendously difficult for you. So that's how to make the game more difficult. Here's another little variant that might make the game easier. The second edition of Yggdrasil comes with the Asgard expansion, and this is going to give all the gods the ability to trance. So if you have the second edition, then I don't think the first edition has sides on the other side of these, but whether you have the first edition with the expansion or just the second edition, all of the god cards have a second side to them. This second side, you're going to flip over to it when you go into a trance. Any of the gods on their turn for an action can choose to go into their trance state by flipping their sheet over. Now, this is going to give you a special power power that's actually going to usually affect all of the different heroes in the game. The downside to this is that when you do this, you lose your other personal power, and you cannot perform the Asgard action while you're in a trance, which means you cannot fight the gods. But the ability that you give to the other players might be worth it. Now, one of the offsetting things to this, however, if you choose to play with trances at all, is that Hel, the particular enemy of Asgard, is going to get a little bit stronger. Every time he removes Vikings from any of the bags, they are not put into the world of the dead. They are permanently removed from the game, which can be very, very nasty and can really set you back if you're hoping to draw a lot of Vikings during the game. But let's go through a few of these trance powers. I'll just go through the same ones that I went through for their normal powers. So Freya, if you use her trance power, when they fight, only half of the Vikings used are placed in the world of the dead. The other half is given to Freya, which is actually pretty interesting. I haven't played with that one yet. Idun's power, at the beginning of each god's turn, the god rolls a die. If the result is white or blue, the god gets one additional action for the turn. Sif's power, as you might imagine, is going to have to do with the artifacts. All the artifacts' bonuses increase by 1. That's really devastating. Thor's trance power is that the combat strength of each giant is reduced by 1. That's really good. And I'll just go through one more. Odin's trance power. When they play on the ice fortress and defeat a giant, the gods discard the giant of their choice, one who is active or one who is still in the deck. So these are really, really powerful abilities. You do have to pay a little bit as far as difficulty in order to use them, but it might add a little bit of flavor to your game and just change things up a bit. Excuse me. So that's Yggdrasil. Let's go to my final thoughts. You know, it's interesting. When I first got Yggdrasil, I was so happy. I was so excited to try it. Busted it open, and it was pretty much what I expected. Beautiful artwork on the board. Beautiful art on the cards. Love all of that. Like the theme. And when we first got around to playing it, it was very, very difficult. Now, we won the game, but of course we weren't playing with any of the extra special super evil cards that you could put into the deck. And the way that it's sort of gone is that we've been able to pull out a win every time we've played with just the normal cards. And no matter what amount of players we've played with, and I've probably played with almost every allotment of players. I've played this solo. I've played it with the max of 6. I've played it with 4 and 5. I guess I haven't played it. I probably even played it with 3. I don't think I've played it with 2. But in any case, every time we play with just the normal stuff, we've won the game. When we've added in the extra cards, we have lost horribly. So the game can be very tough. Component-wise, other than the artwork, it's just a bunch of cardboard chits. I think that this game could be amazing with miniatures, but of course the game is already probably too expensive for what it is as it is. And with miniatures, that would just skyrocket. Although I would love, I'm sure if I looked on Board Game Geek, I'd find pictures of someone who totally pimped it out with a bunch of Norse mythology miniatures. And I'm sure there's a million of those out there somewhere for you to find. So you could certainly pimp this game out and make it look really cool if you could find a box to put all that stuff in. So I can't really complain about the components for what they are. I love the artwork, I love the theme, and I do like how it can be very hard. So why am I not in love with this game the way I am with other hard cooperative games like Eldritch Horror, which I haven't even played as much as Yggdrasil, but I'm, intensely eager to play again. This is a tough one for me. The way that Yggdrasil works is that it's almost like there's a methodology to the game. I hesitate to say that it's not random enough, but that's the first thought that pops into my head. There's certainly randomness in the game. You're rolling that die and hoping for the best, but then again, you can mitigate that die easily with the elves or with the Vikings by risking Vikings if you don't have elves around or don't want to, or keeping those elves in reserve and just risking Vikings because who cares? And there's lots of ways to get more Vikings. You can seed the bags. You can take fire giants out. You can make sure you go to the islands that have a lot of Vikings in it. You can make the game more or less difficult by letting yourself look into the bags. But even then, you can still kind of keep track of how many are in there. So, the die maybe isn't as random as it should be. And the deck of monster cards or the evil god cards, well, that's perfectly random. But then again, even if you play with the extra cards, you know what cards are in there. You know what they're going to do. You can keep track of how many cards come out of the deck and how many more are left of certain gods. So you can say, oh, well, there's only like 2 Nidhogg cards left, but there's like 4 Loki cards left. So let's beat back Loki for now. So that's not as random. And then you've got the Frost Giant deck. Well, you know the perfect allotment of cards that are in there, and you could always do the, I always forget the name of it, but it's the little guy that moves up the world tree, and you know, eventually you can use, if you go all the way to the top, you can just take the giant that you want to kill right out of the deck. So that's not as random either. What am I getting at here? What I'm getting at is that I think that there is a set way to play this game to make sure that you win almost every time. And I'm not saying that I've perfectly solved that. Obviously, I still lose this game sometimes. But I don't feel there's a lot of surprises to this game. It's not as exciting as I think that it should be. It's not to say that it's a bad game at all. It's a good game. But it's just not a fantastic game. It's not what I wanted it to be. Maybe I built it up too much, but it just, even if you... How do I say this? Eldritch Horror, I'm sorry to compare it to this, but it's just another example of a very thematic, hardcore, difficult game. In that game, there's a ton of randomness, and sometimes that sucks. But when you have moments where you're at death's door and, you know, the ancient elder god is awakening and all hope seems lost, and you just roll that awesome roll that, you know, wins a story card or encounter card, and you get like the artifact that's like the Uber sword, and you're able to go and kill Cthulhu. Those moments make all that tension and losing sometimes worth it because it's just so exciting. Yggdrasil doesn't really have that. Like, even when you lose, you kind of know that you're gonna lose, and when you win, you're like, you know that you're gonna win. It becomes pretty obvious. We maybe had one game where it came down to a die roll in the final round. And I would probably say that's the best game of Yggdrasil that we had, but I think that if I played this another 10 times, and will play it at least another 4 or 5 times because of the 10 and 10 challenge, I don't think I'd have many more moments like that. And that's kind of a sad thing. I just feel like, I hate when people say this sometimes, but I do feel like there is a point where you can solve Yggdrasil. Which isn't to say that you're going to win the game every time, but it is to say that you know how you should play it, and if you lose, it's only because what randomness there is didn't work out in your favor. And that's sad, because there's so much to love here as far as the theme and the design, and there are some really cool, innovative things here. It definitely feels different than games like Pandemic and Ghost Stories, which to me are the 2 games. I know I was comparing it to Eldritch Horror, but those 2 games are sort of closer in the scope and sort of I guess in how it feels in the weight of it, as far as like, not like heaviness, but as like how difficult it is to learn and to play. This game feels closer to those, but even Pandemic and, well, I kind of have that problem with Pandemic too. That can feel like I've solved it, but Ghost Stories feels more exciting because of it. Again, it's like things coming in at all sides, and you've got special powers with the monks, and that's not to say that the gods here don't have special powers, and they do, and that's probably one of the things I like the most about the game, especially if you use the expansion that comes with it, with the trance. That can be pretty interesting. But even that, because you're just effectively trading your trance for one of the elder evil ones getting more difficult, and it just adds a little bit of spice to a game that needs a lot of spice. I don't know how to say it, but who knows? I'm going to play this at least, what, 4 or 5 more times to make my quota for the challenge. Maybe a little bit more than that, actually, because some of my plays were, I think, before the new year. So my opinion might change. Maybe I'll find something in there that makes it more compelling. But as it is now, I don't know that I could recommend this compared to other games like Ghost Stories and Eldritch Horror. I think it really is going to depend how much you love the theme here, and if you're just looking for something different, because it certainly is different. It doesn't feel like every other cooperative game, but in some ways that's to its detriment because it's just not as exciting and compelling as some of those other games. So for now, you really need to make sure that you like the theme and that you're looking for that new challenge. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.